how do we think this panic about Dungeons and Dragons even came about? Because it seemed like D&D, we're going to use D&D as an example. There were tons of role-playing games. There's been tons since. But, you know, it seems like all of that was flowing so much under the radar. How did it come to such heavy attention?
Well, I think there's two ways you can look at it. I mean, on one hand, this may have been inevitable. So this was what in sociology is called a moral panic, right? This is like the Red Scare or the Salem witch trials or any number of things where the community, you know, decides that something is a threat to our very existence and we have to sort of rally against it. And in the literature on moral panics, it says what you need to have a really good moral panic is you need one, some innocent who is under attack, and then you need an enemy who isn't strong enough to actually fight back. So D&D is perfect. You've got these innocent children being seduced, and you've got, you know, a shoestring budget role-playing game company. Nobody can really challenge your claims if you want to say this is a satanic game.
Right.
From the other side of things, there were some historical moments that kind of kicked this all off. Dungeons and Dragons was published in 1974, and in 1979 you had this famous case of Dallas Egbert, who disappeared from Michigan State University, and he was from a wealthy family who hired a detective named William Deere, who gave a press release and said, "I think I know why this child disappeared. He played too much Dungeons and Dragons, and he entered a fugue state and is currently wandering around believing that he lives in a medieval world." None of that was true. The kid called his family from New Orleans a few weeks later and said, "I'm ready to come home." But by then the story was in the press. And so that was sort of the beginning of this idea that this was more than a game, that it had profound, dangerous psychological consequences to it.
Yeah, I always thought it was weird because, like, at the time, I remember, you know, my mom was pretty forward-thinking. She was old enough to be my grandparents, so she was born in, like, 1936. And she never really seemed to have much of an issue with any of the role-playing games and stuff like that. But I would hear it, and we would talk about it, and then I'd find myself sitting in my group of friends and looking around at these people, wondering how could anybody be scared of any of us. You know?
Oh, I know. I mean, this was really when I first realized as a child that the grown-ups don't know what they're talking about. Right? So they act like they do, but how could anyone possibly think that this had something to do with danger or criminal activity? We're right here in the living room.
Right, yeah, and we're at home, and we're probably drinking obscene amounts of 2-liter sodas, but, you know, that's about it, you know.
Not doing Cheetos, yeah.
Right, you know. But to me, it was some of the greatest times of my life. Joe, we're coming up on break here. You're listening to Assistant Professor of Religious Studies at Texas State University, Joseph Laycock, and we're talking about his book, Dangerous Games, What the Moral Panic Over Role-Playing Games Says About Play, Religion, and Imagined Worlds. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back.